This is GoodRally. Hi, I'm Rob Callan, and this is the first full episode of the program. If you missed the short teaser clip I released previously, the concept of the podcast in a nutshell is that there is far too much negativity on display right now in the world. In the news, on social media, the political sphere, and even in our personal lives. This show seeks to highlight the goodness that still exists all around us. Each episode, if I do my job correctly, will feature a bit of evidence that the world is still full of good people, full of interesting things to learn, and that there is a never-ending supply of positive things to discuss. This is not about escapism. There are real problems that do need solving, but I believe that we'll be better equipped to deal with those problems if we start with positivity, charge up our batteries, and then jump in to fight the good fight. For the maiden voyage of the podcast, we're going to talk about harps, Hawaii, and yurts. I'm driving down a somewhat secluded road with my wife and kids, essentially tunneling through a dense growth of trees. On the right-hand side, there's a sporadic grouping of houses. Each is seemingly built to the individual specifications of its owner. We see one that even appears to have an observatory on its roof. On the left side of the road, the mighty Mississippi. The area is technically populated, but by no means densely. The population of this western Illinois city, which is Nauvoo, is just north of 1,000.
Your destination is on the right.
This is awesome. Like this is so cool.
This looks right.
What would you call this? The house that we've pulled up to is incredible. More on that later. We're here because in the summer of 2016, my wife and I met the occupants of this house when they were guest speakers at a youth camp. When I had the idea to start GoodRally, I knew that you had to meet these people.
Oh, hi there.
Hello.
Hey.
How are you?
I'm happy, thank you.
In case you missed it, her response was, "I'm happy, thank you." Let's get the names of our hosts.
I'm Irene Claire Holmes, Tukuafu. Married, have 14 children. We're up to 59 grandchildren and 10 great-grandchildren. How's that?
And this is Irene's husband.
Tomasi, Tukuafu, I'm Tongan. Not Samoan, not Fijian. From Tonga.
It's important to distinguish.
Right.
Irene shows me inside the door, and we set down my gear. Stepping inside their house, I cannot contain the surprise at what I see. This is an amazing place you've got here. Irene and Tomasi's home is a yurt-style house. If you want open concept, you found it. This is essentially a single living space with only occasional interior walls for things like bathrooms and the home office. It's completely round, with large windows, some of them stained glass, all along the perimeter. Light is flooding into the space. There's also a circular skylight in the center of the very high ceiling, which adds even more illumination to where we are standing. At the center of the floor is an organic, curved pattern inlaid with multiple hardwoods, and contrasting lines radiate out through the rest of the room. There's also a loft above our heads with a bed and futon options for when company comes over, most frequently Irene and Tomasi's kids and grandkids. The loft itself is supported by massive burnished wooden columns that look as if they're growing right out of the ground. And in fact, there is some life at our feet. One of the columns has a cutout at its base that's filled with dirt, and several large leafy tropical plants are growing out and spreading upward. The house isn't just amazing because of its architecture. The building materials themselves have a story to tell. Number one, this is one of the most amazing houses I've ever been inside.
Thank
This
you.
is amazing.
Well, it'll be one that you'll never be duplicated like this. 'Cause
Yeah.
It's all hand done, everything. These logs, they came from a cabin or a house that was built in Pennsylvania in 1750.
Irene explains that the logs from the 1750 house from Pennsylvania changed hands a number of times and eventually ended up here in Nauvoo, Illinois.
Holland. And he said, you know of anybody that would like these logs and a forklift for $7,000? Me.
The house isn't just aesthetically pleasing. It has some interesting acoustic properties as well.
Come stand over here, right here.
Irene then ushers me over to the center of the house and has me stand at the acoustic focal point of the space. So it's kind of at the...
It's a vortex of sound.
It's amazing. The shape of the house redirects the sound waves back to me, so it's kind of like I'm talking into my own ears.
Because if you speak there, and then you come out here and speak here, you hear a complete difference.
So I'm speaking out here, backing up into the vortex, and...
So a little bit further.
A little bit further this way?
This way, yeah.
Okay, yeah.
Yeah.
Interesting.
Yes.
Acoustics are important because Irene and Tomasi are musicians. But they don't just care about sounds you can hear. They also care about, with apologies to Simon and Garfunkel, the sounds of silence.
Living in this round house, it has a form of silent music. I can't explain it. But I haven't felt a need to always be listening to the radio station. And my husband and I play our instruments, and then I just quietly read or quietly observe the action on the river.
That action on the Mississippi, which flows right through their front yard, produces a lot of sound. It's actually not quite as silent around here as Irene says, but I still think it counts. So how did a power couple like Tomasi and Irene get together? They met in Hawaii, but neither of them is from Hawaii. Irene probably did the most maneuvering to get there. And how did they end up in a place like Nauvoo, Illinois?
Was never on the list. Was not even on a thought, would it be cool if we lived in Nauvoo. I was born in California, in San Diego, and raised in Sacramento, and truly loved that warmer climate. I didn't see snow till I was much older, when we went up to Lake Tahoe one time. And then my parents divorced, and so my brother and I kind of went back and forth. So I had 4 high schools.
She ended up in Texas for a while, but that wasn't for her. She left Texas by bus.
And that bus stopped at every podunk town. Took 3 days just to get out of Texas. And then got to San Luis Obispo. And it was so beautiful in San Luis Obispo. I had my ticket paid for to San Jose, where my mother lived. And I asked the bus driver, I said, "Oh, what's in this beautiful town?" And he said, "Well, they've got a college up on the hill, Cal Poly. They've just let girls in. So there's 17 boys to 1 girl." I said, "Ooh, wow, can I get a refund on my ticket?"
So she lived in California for a while, then Utah, then California again, then Utah again. By now, finding a warmer place to live and study was especially important, so she decided to transfer to what is now known as the Hawaii campus of Brigham Young University. But on the way, she stopped in Seattle to work. She needed cash.
I earned enough money to go on the boat. And it was cheaper to go on the boat to Hawaii than it was to go on a plane. It took 5 days. And the beauties of riding on a boat. It's hard to explain, but there's pictures are still in my mind. The iridescent, huge squid would be in the wake of the great big ship. And I just spent most of my time up deck. I just absolutely loved it.
Once in Hawaii, Irene enrolled at the university.
From there, I met Tomasi, and we dated, and we were the first intercultural marriage on the campus.
Tomasi and Irene then ended up in Canada. But they didn't stay long. Irene found the climate a little brisk.
Oh, it was so cold. When it got 65 degrees below zero, the radio DJ played some Hawaiian music, and I sat in the house crying because it was an old house because it was a cute house, but I didn't know it didn't have much insulation. And I could take my fingernails and scrape the inside of that house and get ice crystals on my fingernails. I said, oh, this is too cold for me. 65 degrees below zero. Tomasi came home and he said, what are you crying for? Take me home to Hawaii. So we sold everything we had and took the train to Santa Barbara where my mother lived, and he went and found a place in Hawaii, and then I joined him.
And Hawaii is where they spent most of their married life. They lived a few other places too, including Tonga, but they eventually ended up here in Nauvoo. Irene and Tomasi originally came out to help a friend named Vicky who was starting up a restaurant, but they stayed when she made an offer they couldn't refuse.
My girlfriend said, Irene, I need someone to build tables for the restaurant I'm building. And can you drive out here? And so we drove out and we built the tables, 10 tables and 40 benches. And she said, if you stay, I'll build your dream house for you. You wanted a round house. And this is Vicki Andrus. I knew her over 30 years ago, and she remembered things about what I wanted in my roundhouse more than I did. She said, didn't you want to have stained glass windows? I said, yeah. I did something right in the premortal world, that I married wonderful Tomasi and had all those kids and have a best friend named Vicki Andrus.
Tomasi and Irene spend a lot of their time playing duets. Here's one of them. Irene plays the dulcimer and Tomasi plays the auto harp. Standing where I am now, watching Tomasi and Irene play, I noticed something I've somehow failed to see before. The central part of their house is chock full of instruments. There's an organ, a couple guitars, multiple harps, a lyre hanging from one of the columns, and a few other instruments I recognize but only by sight. As we continue to talk, I learned that Irene has either built or modified nearly all the instruments in the house.
Cut.
Perfect. Yeah, that was beautiful. Have you ever fallen into something that led to something great later on? That's basically what happened with Irene when she and Tomasi were living in Hawaii. Irene's journey as a builder of musical instruments began, like so many other things in Irene's life, in an unexpected and spontaneous way.
There was a harp convention in 1988 in Logan, Utah. Oh, it was so fun, but I saw the big harps, and they were beyond my price. So I came around the corner, and this guy had kid harps, and I said, oh, wow, how much for the kit? You know, the other big harps, like the ones I make now, they were $7,000. And I said, wow, I'll never get one of those big ones. I didn't see my future. I didn't see my future with that picture. And I came around, and this guy had the kid harps, and I said, oh, wow, where are you from? And he said he was from Minnesota, Stillwater, Minnesota. He said, where do you live? And I said, oh, I live in Hawaii, up in the mountains, and we made our own electricity from the stream, and we could see the ocean. And he stood right up, flapped his hand on his chest, and he said, "Oh, wow, I've been looking for a place to go camping with my 3 teenage children. One is a senior in high school, and this will be the last year we'll go camping as a family. Do you think we could camp out on your property?"
In a quick bit of thinking, Irene was able to negotiate the price for the harp kit in exchange for allowing the guy and his kids to camp on her land.
And he'd previously told me that the kit was $500. And I said, "You want to camp out on my property?" "Yeah, that'd be great," because it was 5 acres. And I said, "Okay, how much for the kit?" So he gave it to me for $300. And so I had only $100 with me. But he knew I was good for my money. He was great.
Once Irene got the harp kit home from the convention, the real work began.
My husband picks me up at the airport and he says, "What's in the big box?" And I said, "I'll tell you about it later, dear." And so I took that box to where my husband taught high school, Kahuku High School. And I took it to Mr. Gallant in the woodworking shop. And I said, "Mr. Gallant, don't you think your class would like to make a harp for a project?" And he says, "Why don't you make it?" I said, "Those are all men's tools. I don't know anything about that. Ask me anything about a sewing machine and about other kind of stuff, but I don't know anything about those tools." And he says, "I really don't like those faculty meetings." He said, "You drop Tomasi off at the faculty meeting and come over here and I'll teach you how to use the tools. I got girls in my class." Changed my life. After I made that one, someone said, "Oh, you made a harp for you. Can you make a harp for me?" And the next thing I know, I'm making harps. Of course, if you make one instrument, you're going to have to try something else. I've made banjos. I've made lyres. And I'm telling you the truth on that. And ukuleles. And all sizes of harps. Some people wanted to have small harps, some people wanted to have larger harps. Hammered dulcimer. Pluck psaltery. Bowed psaltery. Psalmodican. I've probably made some other things. I just love making it. If I can be making from wood, I want to do it.
Irene has also built other rhythmic objects like this little guy called a limberjack.
When the men of olden days gave the king of kings their praise, they had pipes on which to play. They had drums on which to play full of joy on Christmas Day.
The limberjack is kind of hard to describe, but it's like a dancing wooden marionette that you suspend over a sort of springboard paddle, and that acts as the surface that its wooden feet dance upon. You should probably just Google it. Limberjack. You won't be sorry. Now, Tomasi and Irene obviously care a lot when it comes to music. Not just the notes, not just the instruments, but also the thought that goes into it, and the way it gets delivered.
We do not have enough live music in the world today. Elevator music in hospitals? Boo! We need to have real music in hospitals and real music in other places. It doesn't have to be perfect. We're not talking about Carnegie Hall style. We're talking about the enjoyment of doing music at home.
And though Irene and Tomasi certainly enjoy their music at home, they don't just keep it to themselves. Remember that I first met them when they were presenting a music workshop at a youth camp. For them, music isn't just something to be hoarded and used up in solitude. You share it, and by setting it free, you give it life.
I had a Scottish-Irish teacher when I took the course called International Harp Therapy Program, and he taught many things, but you had to really pay attention to him with his accent. But we were at a dinner one time, and he said this: when you pluck a string, it is inside the room forever. But if you pluck a string and you have an open window, you do not know how far the sound can go. You see, playing musical instruments and making them, knowing that they'll go to the next generation. If you make a radio, it might go to the next generation. But a musical instrument, if cared well, can go to several generations, and it will bring joy to the generations that come after you. That was a pretty good cut.
This episode of GoodRally was produced by me, with music help from Tomasi and Irene Tukuafu, as well as additional tracks from Kevin MacLeod, Twin Musicom, and Chris Zabriskie. Audio equipment help from Laura Hooper. A big thanks to Craig Hanks and Mike Wingett for their kind advice and support. And a very special thanks to Tomasi and Irene for letting me into their incredible home and sharing their gifts. You can find more information about this show at the website GoodRally.org, including how to contact us if you have an idea for a story you think we should feature. Thanks. Talk to you again soon.